Ahsoka, Balance of Truth. Book 1, Epilogue. Ahsoka heard words. They were muffled and indecipherable. She felt her form lying prone with her head up. She was on her back. Her head was throbbing with cutting stabs of flashing pain. She felt herself take in air and then subsequently breathe it out. She felt her heartbeat. She attempted to wiggle a toe, feeling the restraint of a boot around it. She felt her hands folded in upon themselves across her chest, and she wiggled a finger slightly, feeling it brush over an opposing wrist. She was alive, she thought. She attempted to open an eye, and the light streaming in stabbed at her perception and forced her to close it quickly. Can someone get the lights? Ahsoka mumbled in the best basics she could manage. She heard two distinct but slight intakes of breath and a flurry of motion as someone carried out a request. The color shift already made her feel at ease as the backlight against her eyelids subsided. She attempted to open her left eye again, this time to a subdued darkness that felt soothing, if nothing else. Shh, shh, ikvata, seone samar, a voice said. Be at peace, you are among sisters. The phrase resonated within her very soul. The voice was not just soothing, it was a balm to her troubled mind, compassionate and genuine. Ashla, it is perfect to see you, the voice said again, in basic this time, with a heavy upward inflection on the vowels. Ashla, she thought. It was familiar. She had used it before, many years before. She opened her right eye and tried focusing on the source of the voice. A bald, ebony woman, head ringed with a black neural implant, faced her. White eyes glowed with an intense familiarity that she couldn't place. A dark-complected hand outstretched and stroked her cheek, the skin soft and warm. The voice and the touch all felt like a long-lost connection. It has been many years, my Ashla, the voice said again. Where, where am I? Ahsoka struggled, the voice to voice the words. She was feeling the dryness of her mouth and a scratch in her throat. Her confusion was palpable, adding to the mystery of her situation. You are with friends, Ashla, allies, sisters. You are safe. Ahsoka's mind was zeroing in on the voice, piecing together the form before her, the name she kept using, and the accent. Far. Hidala? She was sure she was right, but how? Yes, Samhar, it is I. I prefer Nadali these days, though. Ahsoka forgot her pain, didn't care about it, in fact, and fighting the welling nausea and vertigo assailing her, she sat up and wrapped her arms around the woman. Hidal. Sorry, Nadali, she said slowly. She felt Nadali's arms wrap around her body as well, complete with the warmth her hand had held. Ahsoka also felt hands on her shoulders, knowing who they belonged to. She clapped a hand over the one on her right. My Samar, she said. She said it with more intensity than she thought she could, and she burst into tears at the sound of the Togrutan word she had never thought she would hear again in her native tongue. She felt the meaning behind the word, and how everyone in the room defined it through their action. I don't even know what to say. Nadali laughed cheerfully. There will be time for words later. For now, you be at peace, Ashla. You rest. Kawani sat at Ahsoka's side, her arm still around her shoulder. Miara suggested we lay low on Raeda for a little while. The Empire thinks we're dead by all accounts, and we can't risk exposing other elements of the rebellion until we have more data. Miara? Miara Larte? Ahsoka asked if in a fog. The very same, Ashla, Nadali answered. I reached out to Base 1 after leaving the Mustafar system, and it was her recommendation. She said there isn't much there, but the caves remain a good place to avoid detection until we figure out what to do next. R3 will meet us there with the Liberator, Kawani said. She cast her head down as the three paused briefly. Ahsoka, Thana, Barris, was right about one thing, but I am afraid. Ahsoka knew where Kawani was headed with the comment. We don't have any idea what we are up against, she said, what they were all thinking. She knew it was true. She had known it since Dagobah. She thought she had found clarity with the Grand Master, but it had only presented many paths that all claimed a high priority. Something struck Ahsoka. If R3 has a liberator, where are we? Nadali laughed again, an infectious chuckle that lit the dour room. She removed herself from the embrace and opened her palms to the ceiling with her arms outstretched. Welcome to the Shadow Hunter. Ahsoka couldn't hide her amusement. Very fitting, Nadali, remembering vividly the uncommon description a much younger Hadala had given her of the appearance of Inquisitors on Thebeska many years ago. I decided to start doing the hunting once I realized I could, Nadali said with a wink. The move caused a slight downturn of her head, exposing the side of her implant to the slight bit of light entering the room and revealing a cluster of small blue butterflies etched into the device's casing right above her left ear. Ahsoka drew in a slight breath upon seeing them, unnoticed by either Nadali or Kawani. She understood their place upon the Thebaskan, but looked deeper into the reality of the revelation at this moment in time. She may not have known where her path was destined, but she had all the certainty she would need that she was currently walking it. Barris blew out a breath as the whine of the engines began dissipating into nothingness. Her mind was a tumult of exasperation, confusion, and questions with no answers. With the recoil of the landing struts, the rear boarding ramp began hissing open, creating the finality of the moment for which she wasn't quite ready. Trepidation began to wrap its tendrils around her core as she sat for a moment longer, unwilling to remove her gaze from the reconfigured temple before her. She knew it would be perceived as fear, even though reality was the furthest thing from her. It didn't matter to Sidious, and she knew it. I am wasting time, she said to herself, as she pushed herself out of the acceleration chair and folded her hands deeply into her thick robes. With one last look forward, she steeled herself and turned to leave. You are expected, the heavily modulated voice said upon Barris's approach. Not quite sure which of the 3 Imperial guards made the comment, she didn't even bother lifting her head, just continued gliding past them. She looked up in time to see the turbolift open and waiting for her. She immediately began scouring that emotion from her facial expressions. There was no need to key in her destination as she turned upon entering. It had only one stop, she knew. As the door slid closed, she began scouring the motion from her mind and heart, knowing they would be liabilities if she didn't. The passage to the uppermost parapets took no time, and the door was already sliding back open as she gazed upon the phalanx of red-garbed Imperial guards, staves held high before them in perfect symmetry. Let her pass. The command was issued in a rasping whisper, yet heard as a booming echo from the other side of the chamber. The guards broke formation in unison to form a corridor between them. The Emperor sat on his throne, a hood draped loosely over his forehead, arms resting gently upon the controls set into the rests, and betrayed no emotion whatsoever. Barris stoked her resolve and was confident she had sufficiently left all her emotions behind her as she strode forward with determined strides. The lower hem of her robe glided over the polished black stonework without so much as a rustle. She began unfolding her arms from the sleeves of the dark garment to present her emperor with open palms, as was customary. I would have you reveal yourself so that I may more accurately ascertain the effects of your encounter. The raspiness took on a life of its own, compelling her to obey without thought. She placed her hands on either side of her cowl with a slightly audible wince, and revealed to her emperor her mangled face, never once taking her eyes off him. It would appear you have sustained substantial injury, Initiate, as expected, although quite alive, contrary to Side's initial report. I am not strong enough, Master, Barris managed with a significant effort, realizing only then the damage she had sustained was far more substantial than she had thought. The Togruta is all but unassailable with my limited knowledge. The Miri Allen, on the other hand, was close to breaking. Upon finishing, she exhaled with great pain, understanding how Ahsoka's force wave affected her vocal cords. With your permission, Master? She asked in a crackled whisper. She did not make a move, however. She was waiting for his reply. It came in the way of a simple nod directed toward her, and she reached into the folds of her robe for the holochip she had been guarding with her life. Barris dropped to a knee before him and bowed her head as she lifted her hand to present it. He extended his long, sinuous fingers and gently took it from her palm. She lifted her head as he slid the chip into the reader at his armrest, his yellow eyes concentrated entirely upon her. The emitter within the throne sprang to life and began playing out the encounter on Mustafar from her perspective. She watched the hollow, as her emperor was, betraying no emotion from beginning to end. She was surprised, however, when he began to replay the hollow. "My lord," she managed, "there are several key points in the exchange I want to bring to your attention," he issued in a tone she had not expected. For whatever reason, they knew the clones were not Force sensitive. He got up and held his chin between his right thumb and forefinger, his attention focused on the image before him. Crossing his left arm before him, he rested his right elbow on its crook. His change in tone and stance signified to Barris that this would be a lesson, not an admonishment, her shoulders relaxing somewhat. "The Miri Allen seemed to know before the Togruta," she hissed. "Her training has benefited her greatly, my lord." "Yes, it appears so. We may need to revisit the Academy initiatives," he agreed without malice. "Note, just here," he added, pointing to the interaction between the Togruta and the clones at her sides. He paused the image and directed his gaze back to Barris. "What of note would you suggest is happening in this instant?" he asked. She was now assured that this would be a lesson, not the reprimand she had expected. "Ahsoka Tano is utilizing all aspects of the Force to nullify many weaker opponents simultaneously, including myself," she said without redirecting her gaze, boring straight into its sickly yellow orbs and silently cursing his insistence that she speak. She clenched a hand to redirect the pain in her throat, catching his attention briefly. "You were not meant to defeat her, Initiate. Do not consume yourself with your inabilities. Focus your efforts on broadening your knowledge. You did survive, and that pleases me," he said, returning his attention to the frozen image before them, his choice of words not lost on her. "Continue," he said, bringing the image back to life. "Ahsoka killed without conscience. Brutally," she said, watching as her sisters were dispatched horrifically. Her facial expression began to betray an undeserved confidence she sensed as she watched herself deflect precision blaster bolts and then unleash a flurry of lightsaber forms, some new and some old. However, she watched as the Togruta made her look foolish, and the misplaced confidence evaporated into absolute embarrassment. She was sure the reprimand would come. "My lord, my saber technique is quite lacking," she said with difficulty, turning her gaze to the ground. "Do not remove your gaze unless it is your will to remain simply ordinary," he barked out in a lashing tone. "Your skill with a saber is paltry at best, but that is not why you are an initiate, Thana. This exchange teaches us much about the Togruta," he said, changing topics quickly. "She could have dispatched you without effort several times with the blade, yet did not, even after brutally dispatching your sisters not moments before." "Contrition?" Barris asked truthfully. Sidious trained his attention toward the image, furrowing his brow. "I think not. Indecision seems more appropriate." He watched as the image of the Togruta dropped the hilt of the saber he had been drawn to in earlier footage of her. His puzzlement grew at her actions. They were sporadic and random, and her decisions were made now with no past actions to relate to. This form of adversary was incredibly dangerous and unpredictable. "Here, this is what I need you to understand. Tell me what you see." Barris knew the hollow version of herself was conjuring an inner flame and self-incapacitation. She could see it taking hold within the Miri Allen and by the Togrutta's actions. She could sense that she had broken down some minor defenses between the two and was succeeding in her efforts. Then something changed. The Miri Allen broke down into a fetal ball of agony. "Pause, please." She wasn't sure how to direct the emitter, but it obeyed her command nonetheless. "What is that?" she asked in sincere curiosity, extending a finger to point out a blur in the frozen image. She walked into the image to get a closer look, forgetting her surroundings and place. Sidious said nothing, only watching her play out her enthusiasm for now. "May I, my lord?" Barris asked, peeling him out of his thoughts. He looked as she motioned toward the control set into his throne. He gave permission with a soundless nod as she reached to tap the controls. The image responded in kind in slow motion reverse, the blur seen in real time entering the form of the Mary Allen. She stopped the playback and continued forward, watching again as the blur left the Mary Allen, sending her to the ground. The blur continued in a graceful arc directly into the Togruta. At that moment, Barris realized her attempted sorcery had failed completely. She let the remainder of the encounter play out in standard time, forgetting about her failure as she watched Ahsoka stare straight through her before annihilation ensued. Hearing a short gasp of breath, Barris turned on her heel to watch her master's reaction to the destruction. She knew him to fear nothing, to be surprised by nothing. Although it wasn't fear, she sensed a weakness emanating from his very being, a weakness that now explained his reaction to her failure. She had never witnessed destruction the like of which Ahsoka had unleashed. Judging by his response, she doubted that Sidious had either, and quickly decided that this was now turning into an opportunity of sorts. Master Sidious, there is an unknown element at play here. Allow me to discover its meaning, Barris said with truthful exuberance, extolling all the voice she had left to give. As promising as your enthusiasm is, Initiate, I need you to work toward one objective I've been unable to dedicate myself to fully. After you've healed, of course. I am prepared to leave immediately, my lord, she replied. Do not attempt to soothe my intentions, Initiate, and do not confuse acquiescence with piety. Where you are going, you will need all your strength. Now, off to the med center and await further instruction, Sidious hissed in a scolding tone. Barris backed up slowly with a deep swaying bow, her sleeves silently brushing the floor. She turned to leave, but only managed 5 steps before turning back around. Where is it that I am headed, my lord? She asked. Sidious was torn between annoyance and genuine satisfaction. The initiate was bold and had no lack of courage, but she was also reckless and naive, a collection of qualities that would get her killed quickly where she was going. Ambria. That's all he said in return. She motioned to comment further, but he raised a hand in protest, and Barris could hear a slight shuffle of booted feet behind her. She took the message immediately and turned back around, proudly strolling toward the turbolift. As soon as the turbolift door had hissed its way shut, a shadow rose from the wall to the left of Sidious. A human form emerging from the recess of conjoining columns moved to join his master's side. I still say you waste your time with her, my lord, a deep, gravelly voice advised from under its drawn, hooded cloak. And I say you've been wrong before, Sate, Sidious responded. Subject 21 embodies the highest level of force sensitivity to date and is learning at an accelerated pace, and if nothing else, is the center of everything as we advance. Sate Pestage slowly withdrew his hood and decided it best to change subjects to something he may agree with his emperor. The plan to draw out the Togruta worked, my lord, as you had suspected. Foreseen, Sate. There is a vast difference between suspicion and vision, Sidious reprimanded coldly, his eyes still on a turbolift at the chamber's far end. Be that as it may, my lord, I don't think she could have survived, based on Sile's report, that is. Sidious adopted an incredulous look, turning slightly to the skinnier man. She did, he said simply, an arched finger pointing toward the turbolift door. It is unwise to assume the events we hope to happen do. If you question her survival, prove or disprove it. Do not waste my time with conjecture, he finished with a lavish exhale, turned and placed himself onto the seat of his throne. I would like to revisit the Academy initiative, Sate. After what we've seen, those cadets are more capable than I had thought. The Mary Allen was able to surmount what the Togruta was not, and the Thebescan was able to outmaneuver my fleet commander. Sate felt embarrassed at pointing out what should have been obvious. Providing she exhibited the limits of her training, which ended 3 years ago, my lord, and you are already quite aware of my thoughts on side, Sate responded. Sidious was silent momentarily, his mind racing with possibility. I am, Sate, and I take your meaning about the Mary Allen, he paused briefly to extend his train of thought. We have been dealt embarrassing loss recently, but there is victory within. Each step this paltry rebellion takes only draws them further into the open. It exposes their strengths as well as their weaknesses. Let them bask in the destruction of the Death Star for now. Their unity only makes them easier targets. Their overconfidence will be their undoing. And above all, the son of Skywalker has revealed himself. Everything, Sate. Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen. He finished with a cackling laugh, a sickly raspiness that echoed off every surface in the chamber. Sate tensed momentarily as the echoes found purchase within, causing him to flutter an eyelid in irritation. "Leave me," Sidious said suddenly. Sate did not hesitate and disappeared between the guards toward the turbolift. As the guards returned to a phalanx formation, he keyed in access codes to the hollow communicator in his throne. The emitter sprang to life, projecting a blue hue and flickering full-sized Kaminoan. "Lord Sidious, this is unexpected." The greeting came in a slowed basic as she opened her arms before her. "Proceed with Subject 24 immediately. Remove safeguards and accelerate," Sidious commanded, with no room for discussion. "My lord," the long, slender alien responded with a graceful bow. Sidious disconnected the transmission immediately and steepled his fingers together before his sallow chin. He released a deep breath when he heard the whisper of a laugh behind him. He got onto his feet casually and glanced around the room, his yellow eyes surveying its entirety with intense scrutiny but finding nothing. The laughter returned in ascending volume. It was well known to him, each cadence of the bellicose vocalization bringing with it increasing familiarity. He closed his eyes to balance himself and let the event play out, letting Darth Bane have his final word. Please consider a like and sub. It is YouTube's way of getting these to more people. I am less concerned with subs as I am with getting the story out there, and I need your help to do that. Thank you.